Some houses are more than just walls and a roof. Some rooms are more than 4 walls and some doors. When opened, can trap you in another time. Ethan was a 36-year-old single man. He worked as an editor at a small publishing house, spending his days correcting manuscripts and his nights in silence. He had grown used to loneliness. Friends had gradually drifted away. His ties with family had severed long ago. There were unspoken things between him and his mother. His father had vanished from his life before he even had solid memories. His homes had always been temporary. His belongings seemed to always be packed, ready to go. The concept of permanence had never made sense to him. Maybe that's why the feeling of belonging always felt foreign. He was tired of New York's noise, crowds, and artificial conversations. He craved silence and a place where he could put some distance between himself and his past. One morning, while sipping his coffee, an online listing caught his attention. A fully furnished historical home with a preserved texture, scenic view, quiet, and peaceful neighborhood. The photos were captivating. High ceilings, stone walls, large windows, and the price was surprisingly reasonable. 3 months' rent would slightly exceed his savings, but maybe this was a chance to start over. He picked up the phone. An elderly woman answered. "Don't decide over the phone," she said. "Come see the house." When Ethan arrived in the small town of Eldridge Hollow in upstate New York, he felt as if time had paused. Stone streets, rusty signs, antique shops. Even the silence had history here. Each building looked like it had something to whisper. He found the house. The door was heavy wood, worn by the years. Its paint had chipped, the knocker was nearly rusted, but the weathering somehow felt honest. He knocked. An elderly woman answered. Her silver hair was tied in a neat bun. Her eyes held both fatigue and wisdom. She wore a knitted brown cardigan and soft slippers that had clearly seen many years, but her posture was perfectly straight. "Mr. Ethan, welcome," she said, gently nodding. They toured the house together. The ceilings were high, windows curtained, light filtering in to dance among the floating dust particles. There were no cobwebs on the antique furniture, but neither was there the sense that anyone had truly lived here. The house felt like it had been waiting. The floor creaked under his steps. Every footfall echoed something from the past. The smell was odd, somewhere between a damp basement and old book pages, but beneath that, something else. Not mold, not dust, something like breath. For a brief second, Ethan felt as though something behind the walls was watching him. It passed quickly, but left behind a faint tingling in his spine. The woman showed every room except the one at the end of the hallway. That door seemed to belong to another place entirely. It was darker than the others, quieter. Just as he instinctively moved toward it, she stopped. She turned to him, her expression suddenly solemn. "I want you to live here," she said, "but there's one condition. You must never open the room at the end of the hallway, no matter what." Her tone wasn't threatening, nor pleading, just absolute. Like she was quoting a law. Ethan's mind flooded with questions, but he said nothing. The certainty in her eyes told him this condition was non-negotiable. He nodded. "All right," he said, "we have a deal." The first few days were filled with peace. Ethan woke up to birdsong, drank his tea by the window, and spent his evenings with books. The house was silent, but the kind of silence that didn't disturb him. Maybe for the first time, I belong somewhere, he thought. But by the 4th night, something shifted in that silence. It didn't break. It leaked. Sometimes you can feel something has changed, even if you can't name it. That's exactly what Ethan felt. It started with sounds from the attic. At first, he thought it was the roof settling, maybe wind or mice, but the noises returned with consistent rhythm, like something moving in circles up there. 2:34 a.m., 3:12, 3:17. Then the kitchen light began to flicker on its own. A sharp clicking sound. A yellow glow blinked 3 times, and then darkness again. Ethan sat up in bed. His palms were sweating. His heartbeat was like that of someone afraid of being discovered. He rose and walked slowly into the living room. The house was cold, but not like cold air, as if something flowed through the walls, a stillness that carried chill. He was barefoot. As he walked down the hallway, the floor beneath him grew colder. At one point, the warmth vanished completely, ice cold. When he neared the door at the end of the hall, he felt his breath tighten. It was as though his lungs were filling with fog, not air. He could have sworn something on the other side of the door was listening to him. But even then, he didn't touch the door. The next night, the power went out. Ethan lit a candle. Its flickering glow cast shifting shadows that turned furniture unrecognizable. Every step he took echoed, not off the walls, but as if the floorboards were confessing his presence. He reached the hallway and stopped. A pale light leaked from under the forbidden door. It pulsed, not steady, like a heartbeat. Glowing, pausing, glowing. Ethan's candle hissed. The flame bent sharply, twice. Then he heard it. A faint whisper from deep inside the house. Not a word, just a pull. He stepped forward, now standing directly in front of the door. His knees trembled slightly. For a moment, he bent down, thinking of peeking through the keyhole. Then he pulled back. A knot in his throat. A terrifying thought filled him. If I look through, something might look back. Without another thought, he stepped back and blew the candle out. That night, he didn't sleep. Days blurred into nights, nights into tangled dreams. Ethan had stopped tracking time. Mornings felt paler, nights heavier. He woke up exhausted and slept uneasily. The house was no longer warm or inviting like the first days. Even the walls no longer stayed silent. Every object he reached for in the kitchen, every step down the hallway, every breath he took near the closed door, they all reminded him of one thing. He was being watched. His exhaustion didn't come from fear, but from the weight of the unknown. Searching for answers was no longer a choice. It had become a necessity. That evening, while sitting in the living room, he looked up, stared at the square panel in the ceiling. That small attic door he'd never opened, but always noticed. "You owe me an answer," he muttered, and stood up. He pulled down the attic ladder slowly. Each rung creaked as it unfolded. His knees trembled slightly as he climbed. The attic was full of dust, silence, and waiting. Oddly, it was warmer than the rest of the house, but the air felt suspended, as if time didn't move here. Under the beam of his flashlight, boxes, old books, a rusted bike tire, and in the corner, a chest. It was locked, but the hinges were coated in rust. He knelt, felt the edges with his fingers. With a bit of pressure, the hinge cracked and opened. The contents whispered a story. Bent letters, childish scribbles, yellowed photographs. All of them taken in front of that door. 1962, Frank. 1974, Linda. 1986, William. 1999, Alyssa. 2001, Carl. 2009, Hannah. Some had short notes on the back. Time no longer works. The walls don't answer anymore. All that's left is my face. Each face belonged to a different decade, but the same stare. Empty. Frank looked at something, not someone. Alyssa seemed to smile, but her lips were oddly blurred. Carl had no shadow. Hannah's pupils weren't visible at all. Ethan shivered. As he placed the photos back, he noticed something at the bottom of the chest, a small rusted key. Cold, heavy, familiar. He immediately knew it belonged to that room, but taking the key felt different. He rolled it in his palms for a while, hesitated, then pocketed it. As he climbed down the stairs, one thought echoed in his head. There's no turning back now. Ethan woke early that morning. He hadn't slept, just lay still for hours staring at the ceiling. He'd memorized every creak, every breath of silence in the house. He had made up his mind. There was something inside that house that didn't belong to him, and he could feel that the town knew it too. He dressed and stepped outside. Walking through the narrow streets of Eldridge Hollow, he noticed the air was still. The sun was out, but there was no warmth. The wind blew, but nothing moved. He knocked on the door of the neighboring house. An elderly woman answered. "Do you remember anything about the house across the street?" he asked politely. "How long has it been rented?" She didn't meet his eyes. She turned her head slightly, speaking as if reluctant to mention a neighbor's name. "That one? It's been empty for years." Ethan stepped closer. "I've been living there for 2 weeks," he said. "You pass it every day." The woman's eyes briefly met his, then dropped. She shrugged. "We haven't seen anyone." "That house, sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. Best not to ask too much," she mumbled and quietly shut the door. He crossed the street and entered a small grocery shop. The man behind the counter didn't even look up. Ethan asked the same question. After a long silence, the man adjusted a stack of newspapers, then slowly took off his glasses and cleaned them. "Don't go near that house," he said. "Forget you came, and when you leave, don't look back." A cold drop of sweat slid down Ethan's forehead. "Has anyone else lived there before?" he insisted. The man said nothing. He picked up a bag of tea from the shelf and placed it on the counter. Then, as he walked toward the register, he whispered a single word. "It swallows." The other locals weren't much different. No one spoke in detail. It was as if the house existed in a fog even inside their memories. Some pretended not to hear. Others changed the subject. A child dropped his ball upon seeing Ethan. It rolled away as the boy clung tightly to his mother. She pulled him along, avoiding Ethan's gaze. Ethan's mind was set now. Whatever secret this house holds, I won't leave without facing it. That morning, Ethan left his coffee unfinished. As he walked toward the center of town, one thought looped in his mind. Someone must have written about that house. He stopped in front of a dusty little store with a faded sign and fogged-up windows. Eldridge Hollow Bookshop. As he stepped inside, the wooden floor let out a groan. The air smelled of old paper, with a hint of incense. The shop was narrow and filled with tightly packed shelves. Between them, a shadow moved. An elderly man with glasses slipping down his nose, holding a dusty hardcover book. He looked up. When their eyes met, something shifted in the air. The man said nothing. He simply looked down again. Ethan didn't ask. He followed an instinct as his feet carried him between shelves. His hand reached for a thick, unnamed volume. Inside the cover, a title shimmered in faded gold. The Vanished Homes of the Hudson Valley. As he held the book, the man behind him spoke. That book doesn't fall into just anyone's hands. Ethan turned. There's a house up north, high walls, scenic view. One room stays locked. The man removed his glasses and wiped them. Are you staying there? Ethan nodded. The man was silent for a moment. Then he sat down slowly, folding his hands over his knees. Years ago, a young pianist moved into that house. He brought joy to the town. We could hear him playing at night. Then, one morning, the music stopped. When we went to check, the house was empty. No trace of him, no piano. Ethan swallowed hard. He opened the book. Inside were newspaper clippings, photo fragments, and paragraphs scribbled in faded ink. A note read, "Time bends behind that door. Clocks go silent. Mirrors lie. Even with your eyes wide open, you forget yourself." A scrawled line. There's someone inside the wall, but they don't breathe. They're just waiting. Each sentence sank into Ethan like a stone. As he turned the pages, one truth became clear. The house doesn't just silence the forgotten, it silences the ones who remember. He closed the book. The only sound in the room was his heartbeat, thudding in his ears. Their eyes met again. The old man whispered, "A book won't be enough. That door must never open." Ethan clutched the book to his chest. His face was calm now, cleansed of fear. It's too late, he thought. Whatever this house is hiding, I will face it. 3:17 a.m. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were calling his name. Ethan stood before the door. He pulled the key from his pocket. It was cold, heavy, like time itself. He turned the lock. Click. The door creaked open. There was no room inside, only a giant mirror, dusty, yet alive. It was breathing. He stepped forward, saw his reflection, but behind him, others stood. Frank, Linda, William, Alyssa, Carl, all there, still watching, waiting. Ethan reached out. His fingertips met the glass. It wasn't solid. It rippled like water. Suddenly, it pulled him. A pressure on his chest, not an invitation, a force. His feet lifted from the floor. His body passed through the surface. And then, memories. A child's laughter. A ticking clock. His mother's voice. And then, his own. I just wanted peace. The door slammed shut behind him. The mirror turned black, and Ethan was no longer there. But his face was now inside of the mirror, trapped, still watching. Months later, another quiet day began in Eldridge Hollow, the kind the town was used to. But some houses, even at sunrise, remain in shadow. On a local real estate website, a new listing appeared. No date, no urgency. A fully furnished historical home with preserved character, scenic view, quiet and peaceful neighborhood. The words were familiar, but somehow hollow, as if written not by a person, but by a habit. Late afternoon. Mist had begun to swallow the house's stone facade. Someone approached, a young woman, a suitcase in hand, a look of tired curiosity on her face. She paused, looked up at the windows. Something moved behind the glass. Not her reflection, someone else. A face, gone in an instant. She shivered, but didn't turn away, didn't ask questions. She walked to the door, lifted the brass knocker. The door creaked open on its own, and the house was ready to begin a new cycle.